The Request Revolution by Tired PJO Fan. Chapter 2. Percy messes up big time. Again. Hi again, Mother. I am once again requesting for the safety of every single baby seal in existence. I mean, just look at how cute they are with their big eyes, and I would definitely die for all of them, and I just want them to be happy. Also, a new hairbrush wouldn't go amiss. Thank you. Percy was thrilled. He was also extremely terrified of being killed by a particularly angry god or goddess, but those two emotions generally tended to go together, so he was more or less used to it by now. What he wasn't used to was the younger campers actually talking to him. He had gotten used to the awestruck looks from afar at the Percy Jackson, but apparently starting a revolution against the gods, however accidentally, makes a person more approachable. Or something. Not that he would stop, though. It was good that the newer demigods were feeling comfortable enough to request stuff from their godly parents, and it was spicing the council meetings up a bit if the letters from definitely not his father were to be believed. Besides, it was funny! Okay, it was more than funny. It was hilarious watching 12-year-olds ask actual gods for the newest Pokemon cards. Not to mention he had yet to be struck down by the gods, which is always a bonus in his books. Anyway, it could be worse. The gods could actually be granting their requests. In fact, to his knowledge at least, out of all the outrageous requests, only his Disneyland tickets were given. Something he couldn't help but feel a little smug about. Poseidon really was the coolest god. Speaking of which, you should probably ask Annabeth if she wants to go to Disney sooner rather than later. Coming to that conclusion, Percy made his way over to the beach to swim in the sea for a while and maybe find some crabs to talk to. They were extremely good at poker for some reason. Yes, he can admit that it may have hurt his pride to lose a card game against crabs. But poker always did bring up bad memories of smelly Gabe, so maybe it was for the best. Just as he was taking his shoes off, getting ready to get into the sea, Annabeth came running up to him with a look of panic on her face. Percy! Percy, you have to come quickly to the big house! Percy felt his heart drop. What's wrong? Is it another prophecy? Annabeth shook her head frantically. No, there's an army of disco skeletons that are currently playing jazz music. Jazz music? Isn't that what Nico... Percy felt the color leave his face as Annabeth nodded, and he could hear Hades laughing at him from the underworld. From the northeast, but on Friday the winds will... Right, hello, Dad? Father? Whatever. I am requesting something that can stop an army of disco skeletons from playing jazz music. Yes, I know, Nico. This is my fault. Yes, I still think it's funny. You know, you could just... Okay, Dad, so Nico was refusing to help, so I really need you to come through. Great. I hope you accept my offering and grant my request. Annabeth, no, you can't stab a skeleton. They don't have a head. Hades, Zeus said in a dangerously calm voice. Zeus? Hades replied, just as calm. Poseidon looked between the two of them and decided to take matters into his own hands. Poseidon? What? Poseidon shrugged. Neither of you was going to say it, and I wanted to be involved. Right. Okay, Hades, tell me you did not grant your son's request for an army of disco skeletons that can play jazz. I did not grant my son's request for an army of disco skeletons that could play jazz. Zeus sighed and ran a hand slowly down his face. Are you lying? Yes. Zeus sighed again. He seemed to be doing that a lot lately, and leaned on the arm of his throne. Would you care to inform the rest of the council why you did so? Not particularly. Hades was loving this. He could overlook the fact that it originated from the sea spawn, and oh yes, he knew that Poseidon was lying. This had that Percy Jackson's name written all over it. Just because it was the most entertaining thing he'd had the pleasure of viewing in a long time. Not to mention the funny shades of purple his youngest brother's face could turn were quite interesting. Oh look, there was a new color. How fascinating! Who here has granted their children's requests over the past week? Zeus growled, glaring at the rest of the council. For a moment, he appeared to calm down as only Hades' hand was raised. Then, quite proudly, Poseidon raised his hand as well, followed by a hesitant Hermes and a thrilled Aphrodite. The remaining Olympians all looked on in concern as Zeus stopped being calm again and spoke out one word through gritted teeth. Explain. Seemingly pleased with that reaction, Poseidon lowered his hand and said, My son, Perseus Jackson. You all remember him, right? The savior of Olympus, defeater of Kronos, one of the seven. Well, my son asked me for some Disneyland tickets so he could go on a date there with that Annabeth girl. Athena grumbled quietly to herself about how she still didn't think that sea spawn was good enough for her daughter, but no one heard her. Or they did, but no one wanted to hear another remix of the same argument she and Poseidon had every time the two demigods were brought up. Zeus had his hands clenched into fists and nodded at Hermes to get him to talk. Well, my daughter asked me for something called a hoverboard, and I thought, what's that? And apparently it's a form of transportation where you stand on the board and just lean where you want to go, and you go. And so I thought to myself, that's not really an outrageous request, is it? And then I answered myself, no, it isn't. So I got her one, and it wasn't easy at all. I tried about 20... That's enough, Hermes, Aphrodite interrupted. My turn to explain now. One of my favorite sons requested it of me, and how could I refuse? He asked for a... What did you ask for? The guilty son of Aphrodite shifted his feet and looked up at Percy. I didn't think she'd actually give it to me. So you asked for a 5-star spot for the middle of the forest? Percy looked at the spot that occupied a good bit of their capture the flag territory and groaned, directing his next question towards Chiron, who was standing behind him. Would it be considered rude to ask her to take it back? Oh, absolutely. Lady Aphrodite might take it as a personal slight against her and curse you, or she might think you sent it back because it wasn't grand enough and send a bigger one, Chiron answered, studying the scene before him. So I do believe that we are now stuck with this. I wonder if they have a specialized centaur area. Right, okay. This is fine. I'm fine. This is fine. You all right there, Percy? Absolutely. Spoiler alert, he was not absolutely fine. Also, those stupid skeletons would only be distracted by the strawberries for a little while, and then he'd have to find another way to entertain them because Nico still did not want to get involved. In hindsight, Percy realized that annoying the gods that could easily make his life hell was not one of his brightest ideas, but in his defense, it wasn't really his idea in the first place. His heart was in the right place, or something like that. His teachers used to say that about him a lot. It was a polite way to say, your son is a menace, but I don't want to say that to your face in case you get mad. Maybe he should see if Annabeth had any ideas on what to do. After all, Athena always has a plan. Absolutely not. But wise girl, I am not helping you commit treason against the gods. It's not technically treason per se. Annabeth pinched the bridge of her nose and grabbed Percy's arm before pulling him in the direction of his cabin while ignoring the wolf whistles and calls of, keep the door open 5 inches, you two. We are not having this conversation out here. She pushed him through the open door and slammed it behind her before stopping behind Percy, and he threw his hands in the air in exasperation. Not again, Percy whined, glaring at the envelope lying on his messy bed. Which god did I piss off this time? This time? Asked Annabeth, staring at the envelope as well. How many gods have you pissed off already? Percy waved his hand in an attempt to convey that he had pissed off every single god at least once in his life. But Annabeth understood the vague gesture because she was there with him when he annoyed most of them, and was probably the only reason he didn't annoy them to the point of murder. He picked up the letter and read through it a couple times, then dramatically collapsed onto his bed and held it out for Annabeth, who looked over it, blinked, glanced over at Percy, blinked again, then turned back to the letter in her hands. Perseus, just a heads up, you may be called up to Olympus soon, as some gods, namely Athena and Zeus, are accusing you of rebelling against the gods. I would highly recommend you ask your girlfriend to put together some defense on your behalf, because they are not pleased. Hermes still thinks you're hilarious, though, so you have one ally there. So does Aphrodite for some reason. Your father. Not your father. Huh? Annabeth said. You really messed up this time, didn't you? A timid knock at the door broke them out of their despair as a shy head peeked into the cabin. Clarice told me to remind you that boys and girls aren't allowed to be alone in a cabin together.